before we really get into like any type of questions that I have for you specifically, talk to us a little bit about your branding and business coaching and copywriting philosophy. Kind of roll that. I know those are three separate things, but let's roll them up and talk a little bit about your philosophy of how you work with business owners.
Sure. So my biggest thing is that I do not want to overwhelm business owners more than they already are. We always feel like we are pulled in so many directions. We have so many different things that we need to be focusing on, putting money into, putting energy into, and it
Yeah.
can feel so overwhelming. So my philosophy is always just to work with my clients to figure out what is your end goal. Okay, how can we figure out what high leverage activities we can implement into your business strategy so that you can get there as fast as you possibly can without being super overwhelmed? Because I always say, like, I can create a strategy for you where you're posting 3 times a day on 7 different platforms, 7 days a week. But if you are not going to do it, it doesn't matter. So how can
Yeah.
we look at what you actually have the capacity to do, where you have the capacity to outsource things, and how can we strike a balance there that will get you to where you want to go the quickest without you just being like, screw it, I don't want to do any of it. And like, you do it. It's kind of like working out where you're like, I'm going to do it. And you do it for like 30 days and then you fall off the wagon. Then you feel guilty you're not doing it. Content creation and marketing feels the same way for a lot of business owners. So I try to help them be like, let's make small sustainable changes. Can we add an apple into your diet? Can we add
Yeah.
one video into your week? Like, how can we do this in a way that really feels good for you?
Yeah. So I like that analogy that marketing and content creation is like going to the gym, right? Like the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Exactly.
I had a friend of mine tell me, I was like, I went to, I was presenting at a business conference this week, and the topic was how to create content without feeling like you're always creating content in this overwhelming loop. And he's
Yeah.
like, so you're going to teach people how not to make like an overwhelmingly amount of content, but I always see content from you. And I was like, that's interesting because I don't feel like I produce a ton of content, right? Uh, and you talked about this idea of like high leverage activities, aka let's add an apple into your diet. What's a few like common apples that you see for the clients that you've worked with that really kind of make that oomph?
So I feel like the first step in kind of like before you even create the content, you need to narrow down on what your message is. And that
Yeah.
like that is my bread and butter. That is what I love to help people do because that really is the thing that sets you apart. You can have two realtors that are both selling houses to the same type of family in the same type of town. But like what is your unique take on that? What is your energy around that? And then how can we take that and put that into your message? So once you figure out what your message is, then creating content kind of like flows out of you because what you're passionate about. It's almost like you've tapped into this well of like, here's who I am, here's my voice, here's what I believe in. And it's kind of like when you can connect those dots, what you want to say just flows right out of you. Like it's so fun to see with my clients in sessions where we're like talking through, I'm asking them questions, they're kind of, going on, and I boil it down into a sentence and I'm like, here you go. Here's your soundbite for that. And they're like, oh my gosh. But it's so cool, like what comes through. You're like, when something comes out of a client's mouth and they're just like, it's da 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 da. I'm like, oh my gosh, you can just feel it in the room of like,
Yeah.
oh, like that's your message, that's your tagline. Like it's so good at plans. But when you get that, then you're kind of like, okay, cool. That kind of like gives you this energy and the momentum to then go out, take those little bits and pieces and create content from them. But if you're like, at least for me, and I know for a lot of my clients, when you feel like I have to go out and create content, well, what am I going to say? I don't know what I want to say. That's the hardest thing. It's like translating what's in your head, getting it to come out of your fingers or out of your mouth. Like it's challenging for people. So when you can kind of like back up and say, okay, here's my message and here's what I really want to talk about, the next pieces of it become a little fun because it's like, I know the subject. So
Yep.
now how can we do this creatively? Also taking into account your personality to create that content.